Chapter 1. The Lie About Confidence. Most people think confidence means being loud. They're wrong. The loudest person in the room is often the most insecure. The constant talking, the over-explaining, the need to prove, the need to dominate, the need to be seen. That's not confidence. That's compensation. Real confidence is quiet. And if that challenges you a little, good. It should. Because somewhere in your life, you've probably tried to prove yourself. You've tried to sound smarter, stronger, more impressive. You've rehearsed conversations in your head. You've overthought your messages before sending them. You've replayed moments, wondering if you looked weak. That's not confidence. That's survival mode. Here's the truth most people never say out loud. The more you need others to see you as confident, the less confident you actually are. Confidence doesn't perform. It doesn't beg to be validated. It doesn't chase applause. It doesn't rush to fill silence. It doesn't panic when challenged. It observes. It chooses. It responds or doesn't. There are two types of confidence in this world. The first is loud confidence. It talks over people. It defends itself instantly. It explains every decision. It needs to win every argument. It feeds on attention and shrinks when ignored. The second is silent confidence. It listens more than it speaks. It doesn't explain unless necessary. It doesn't react emotionally to criticism. It doesn't need to convince you of anything. One is fragile. The other is dangerous. And here's where the identity shift begins. You've been taught to associate visibility with power. Social media celebrates volume. Culture rewards noise. But in reality, the people who truly hold power are the ones who can walk into a room, say very little, and still control the energy. They don't chase attention. Attention gravitates towards them. Why? Because they don't need anything from anyone in that room. Let that sink in. Neediness leaks through behavior. It shows up in your tone, your posture, your urgency, your over-explaining. And people feel it instantly. Even if they don't consciously understand it, they react to it. But when you remove need, something changes. Your movements slow down. Your voice steadies. Your reactions shrink. Your presence expands. And here's the promise. By the end of this audiobook, people will treat you differently. Not because you demanded respect, not because you forced dominance, but because your energy will no longer be asking for permission. That shift begins with confronting a hard reality. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being accepted was safer than being powerful, that blending in was smarter than standing firm, that explaining yourself would prevent rejection. And maybe it did, temporarily, but it also trained you to dilute yourself. Dangerous confidence is the opposite of dilution. It is clarity without apology. It is calm without submission. It is presence without performance. And over the next chapters, you're going to dismantle the habits that made you smaller than you needed to be. But before we go deeper, understand this. There is an advanced principle behind all of it. A psychological shift so powerful that once you understand it, external approval loses its grip on you completely. For now, just recognize this moment. If something in you feels exposed, good. That means you're ready. If you're tired of over-explaining, overreacting, and over-seeking approval, you belong here. Because this is not about becoming louder. It's about becoming untouchable. And that transformation starts now.
Chapter 2. The Hidden Cost of Seeking Approval. Approval feels good. A compliment, a like, a nod of agreement, a "you did great." Your brain lights up. You feel validated, seen, safe. And that's exactly the problem. Because approval is addictive, not metaphorically, neurologically. Every time someone validates you, your brain releases dopamine, the same reward chemical involved in gambling, social media scrolling, and other compulsive behaviors. Over time, you begin to associate external approval with emotional safety. And once that connection forms, you start chasing it. This is behavioral conditioning at work. When a behavior is rewarded, it gets repeated. You post something and get praise. You post again. You over-explain and avoid criticism. You over-explain more. You agree with others and get accepted. You silence disagreement next time. Slowly, without realizing it, you train yourself to perform for validation. And the cost? You lose authenticity. You lose decisiveness. You lose emotional independence. Let me give you a simple, real-world example. Imagine you arrive late to a meeting. Instead of calmly saying, "Thanks for waiting," you launch into a 5-minute explanation. Traffic was terrible. Your alarm didn't go off. There was construction. Your phone died. You keep talking because you're trying to control how people perceive you. You don't want them to think you're irresponsible, so you overcompensate. But here's what actually happens psychologically. The more you explain, the more uncertain you appear. The energy behind over-explaining signals anxiety, and anxiety signals low status. Ironically, in trying to protect your image, you weaken it. Now multiply that small moment across your entire life. You soften opinions to avoid disagreement. You say yes when you mean no. You adjust your personality depending on who's in the room. You hesitate to speak unless you're sure you'll be accepted. This is validation addiction in its subtle form. You don't notice it because it feels normal, but beneath it is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing connection. And as long as approval is your emotional fuel, your confidence will remain fragile, because approval can be given and taken away. The solution is not to become cold or indifferent. The solution is detachment, not emotional shutdown, emotional independence. Here's the framework you'll begin building. First, separate effort from reaction. You control your effort. You do not control how others respond. Second, separate identity from feedback. Someone disagreeing with you is not the same as someone diminishing your worth. Third, reduce approval-seeking behaviors consciously. Shorter explanations, clearer boundaries, slower reactions. You are retraining your nervous system. Right now, it equates approval with safety. Over time, you will teach it that self-respect is safer than validation. That shift changes everything. Because once you stop chasing approval, something unexpected happens. You become harder to manipulate. When you no longer need people to like you, you stop adjusting yourself to secure their reactions. Your tone steadies, your posture strengthens, your words shorten. And eventually, silence becomes your leverage. When you're not scrambling to be understood, silence stops feeling threatening. It becomes controlled, intentional. We'll go deeper into that power soon. For now, understand the hidden cost. Every time you chase approval, you hand over authority. And every time you detach from it, you reclaim it. You don't need to be liked to be respected. You don't need applause to be powerful. And the moment your nervous system understands that, your presence changes. In the next chapter, we'll expose something even more dangerous than approval seeking: reactivity. Because approval addiction creates something predictable, and predictable people are easy to control.
Chapter 3: Why Reactive People Lose Power. Here's a hard truth. If someone can control your emotions, they control you. Pause on that. Every time you snap back at criticism, every time you rush to defend yourself, every time your mood shifts because of someone else's tone, you are handing them power. Most people don't see it this way. They think reacting is strength. They think firing back proves confidence. They think showing emotion proves authenticity. But emotional impulsiveness is not dominance. Emotional control is. Look at high-status individuals in any environment: boardrooms, negotiations, competitive sports, leadership roles. The person who remains composed under pressure commands more authority than the person who reacts loudly. Why? Because composure signals control, and control signals power. This idea isn't new. The Stoic philosophers understood this thousands of years ago. They taught a simple but dangerous principle. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control your response. And in that response lies your freedom. Most people fail that test daily. Someone insults them, they react. Someone ignores them, they spiral. Someone disagrees, they tense up. Their emotional state becomes a puppet tied to external strings. And here's the social contrast most people miss. Reactive people are predictable. Predictable people are manageable. Manageable people are not powerful. But the person who doesn't react on cue, the one who pauses, who looks, who decides instead of exploding, that person becomes psychologically difficult to control. And difficulty creates respect. Let's escalate this. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, someone criticizes you publicly. You immediately defend yourself, raise your voice slightly, and explain your position with urgency. Even if your argument is valid, your energy betrays you. In the second scenario, you listen. You nod slightly. You respond calmly, briefly, or you don't respond at all. Your breathing doesn't change. Your posture doesn't shrink. You show no emotional leakage. Which version feels more powerful? Be honest. This is where the identity disruption happens. You've been trained to believe emotional expression equals strength, but in competitive social dynamics, controlled emotion equals dominance. That doesn't mean suppression, it means regulation. It means choosing your reaction instead of being owned by it. And here's your pattern interrupt challenge. For the next 7 days, do not react immediately to anything emotionally charged. Not texts, not comments, not criticism, not praise. Pause. Even 3 seconds changes your nervous system pattern, because in those 3 seconds, you move from impulse to intention. That shift is subtle, but it is dangerous. Now understand something deeper. Reactivity doesn't just make you look weaker, it makes you feel weaker. Every time you lose control emotionally, you reinforce a subconscious belief, I am at the mercy of external events. Over time, that belief erodes confidence from the inside. But when you remain steady under pressure, you send yourself a different signal. I decide. That internal message builds power faster than any compliment ever could. And soon, we're going to talk about rejection, one of the strongest emotional triggers people face. I'll share a moment where rejection could have broken composure completely, and how that shift became leverage instead. We'll resolve that in coming chapters. For now, understand this. Reactive people defend their ego. Powerful people defend their frame. When you master your emotional responses, you stop playing emotional defense and start controlling the environment instead. Because the person who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled.
Chapter 4. Silence is a weapon. Let me give you a moment that changes everything. A man is in a meeting. His idea gets challenged, not respectfully, but dismissively. The tone is sharp. The intent is clear. The room goes quiet, waiting for his reaction. Most people would rush to defend themselves. They'd talk faster. They'd try to justify. They'd fight for status in real time. He doesn't. He looks at the person, calm, still. 3 seconds pass. Then he says, evenly, noted. And nothing else. The room shifts. The challenger suddenly feels exposed. The tension doesn't escalate, it flips. The energy changes.
The man who was attacked now appears composed. The one who attacked looks reactive. That is the power of silence. High-status individuals understand something most people don't. The first person who loses emotional control loses the frame. Frame control is a psychological principle in social dynamics. Whoever defines the emotional tone of an interaction holds power. If someone provokes you and you react emotionally, they've pulled you into their frame. But if you remain still, measured, and sparse with words, you keep your frame intact. And people feel that. Silence is not weakness. Silence is controlled pressure. It forces the other person to sit in their own energy. It denies them the reaction they were unconsciously seeking. And when people don't get the emotional feedback they expect, they often destabilize. This is why silence unsettles insecure people. Because silence communicates, I am not threatened, I am not rushed, I am not seeking your approval. Now let's be clear, this isn't about being passive. It isn't about letting people walk over you. It's about choosing when to speak and when to withhold. Because words are energy, and most people spend theirs impulsively. When you speak less, but with precision, your words gain weight. When you pause before responding, your response gains authority. When you allow silence after making a statement, it signals certainty. Confident people don't fill space to reduce discomfort. They let discomfort work for them. Here's where identity reinforcement happens. If you constantly rush to respond, you are communicating that silence makes you anxious. If silence makes you anxious, you are still dependent on external reassurance. But when you can sit in silence without shrinking, something changes internally. Your nervous system stops interpreting quiet moments as danger. You begin to associate stillness with control. This is the beginning of what we'll call the unshakable mindset. An unshakable mindset does not chase the last word. It does not defend unnecessarily. It does not over-explain under pressure. It remains steady. And steadiness is intimidating in environments built on noise. Let's escalate this further. In arguments, the person who talks more often reveals more. The person who stays composed gathers information. They observe tone, insecurity, strategy. Silence gives you data. Talking gives away leverage. When you master silence, conversations shift. People lean in more. They reveal more. They try harder to fill the gap. And in that effort, they expose themselves. You stay grounded. You stay controlled. You stay powerful. Over the next chapters, you'll see how silence connects to rejection, approval, and emotional independence in ways most people never realize. But for now, understand this. Silence is not empty. Silence is signal. And when you combine silence with emotional regulation, you don't just appear confident, you become psychologically difficult to move. That is the unshakable mindset beginning to form. And once you build it fully, people stop trying to test you. Because they can't find your edge.
Chapter 5. The Power of Emotional Non-Compliance. There is a subtle pressure in almost every social interaction. An invisible demand. React here. Laugh now. Be offended. Be impressed. Be flattered. Be intimidated. Most people comply automatically. They emotionally perform on cue. Someone raises their voice, they shrink. Someone praises them, they glow excessively. Someone criticizes them, they tense and defend. Someone withdraws attention, they chase. This is emotional compliance, and it is the silent killer of power. Emotional non-compliance is different. It is the decision to feel what you choose, not what is socially triggered. It is the refusal to let someone else dictate your internal state. Years ago, I failed this completely. I remember sitting in a discussion where someone dismissed my work in front of others. The comment wasn't aggressive, but it was loaded. I felt it instantly, the heat in my chest, the tightening in my jaw. I reacted. I defended. I explained. I talked longer than I needed to. The conversation moved on, but afterward I felt smaller. Not because of what they said, because I had performed exactly the emotional reaction they expected. That was the moment I understood something critical. Reacting emotionally doesn't protect status, it reveals insecurity. That realization was uncomfortable, but it changed everything. Here's what happens socially when you emotionally comply. You reinforce the other person's frame. You validate their ability to move you. You confirm that your state is externally controlled. But when you refuse to emotionally perform, something shifts. If someone tries to provoke you and you stay neutral, they lose leverage. If someone praises you and you receive it calmly, you signal grounded confidence. If someone withdraws attention and you don't chase, you display abundance. Calm authority is not loud, it is regulated. In social dynamics, the person who appears least emotionally dependent on the interaction usually holds more psychological power. Why? Because dependency leaks. When you need approval, your body speeds up. When you fear rejection, your tone tightens. When you crave validation, your responses lengthen. Emotional non-compliance interrupts that cycle. It says, my internal state is not negotiable. This doesn't mean suppression. It doesn't mean becoming robotic. It means you feel fully, but you respond selectively. There is strength in being emotionally responsive, but there is dominance in being emotionally disciplined. And here's where it deepens. Most emotional reactions are tied to outcome attachment. You react strongly because you need the meeting to go well. You react defensively because you need to be respected. You react anxiously because you need to be liked. The need fuels the reaction. Remove the need, and the reaction weakens. We will go much deeper into this outcome detachment layer soon, because it is one of the most advanced shifts in this entire transformation. For now, start noticing something simple. When you feel emotionally triggered, ask yourself, what outcome am I afraid of losing right now? Respect? Approval? Status? Connection? That question alone creates space, and space creates control. Emotional non-compliance is not coldness, it is sovereignty. It is the beginning of true internal leadership. When people realize they cannot easily provoke you, flatter you, intimidate you, or destabilize you, they adjust. Because they sense something rare. You are not playing emotionally on command, and that is the early architecture of becoming untouchable. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this ties directly into over-explaining, one of the clearest signals of hidden insecurity. And once you see it, you won't unsee it. Chapter 6. When you stop explaining, you start leading. Over-explaining feels polite. It feels responsible. It feels like clarity. But most of the time, it's fear. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of being judged, fear of losing approval, and people can feel it. Over-explaining is rarely about giving information, it's about managing perception. It's an unconscious attempt to control how others see you. The longer the explanation, the more anxious the energy behind it. And anxious energy lowers status. Think about it carefully. When someone says, "I won't be able to make it," and stops there, it feels firm. When someone says, "I'm so sorry, I really wanted to come, but traffic was crazy and I didn't sleep well, and I've just had a long week and I hope you understand," it feels different. The content may be harmless, the energy is not. Over-explaining communicates, "Please don't think badly of me." Now visualize two versions of yourself. Before. You walk into a room slightly tense. You explain decisions before anyone questions them. You soften your opinions in case someone disagrees. You justify your boundaries with long stories. You speak quickly to avoid silence. After, you walk in steady. You state decisions simply. You allow disagreement without scrambling. You say, "That doesn't work for me," and stop. You let silence exist without panic. Same person, different posture, different pacing, different internal state. And here's what changes externally. People interrupt you less. They question you less. They respect your time more because you stopped negotiating your own authority. Let me give you a case-style example. In a leadership setting, two managers announce a new direction. The first manager explains every detail, anticipates every objection, fills every silence, and keeps talking to make sure everyone is comfortable. The second manager states the decision clearly, gives essential reasoning, and stops. When questions come, they answer concisely. They don't over-defend. They don't rush. Which one feels more certain? Certainty doesn't need excessive explanation, and people instinctively follow certainty. Here's the deeper social dynamic. When you over-explain, you subtly place yourself in a lower frame. You signal that others hold evaluative authority over you. You position yourself as someone seeking permission rather than someone exercising choice. Leadership energy is the opposite. Leadership states. It does not plead. Now let's escalate the tension. Over-explaining isn't just about communication. It's about identity. If you constantly explain yourself, somewhere inside you believe your choices aren't valid on their own. That belief must be confronted. Because until you believe your decisions stand without defense, you will continue shrinking under perceived judgment. This is uncomfortable to hear. Good. Midpoint transformations require discomfort. Here's your shift. Start trimming explanations in half. When you say no, stop after no. When you decide, state the decision, not the fear behind it. When you speak, remove the emotional cushioning. You are retraining your nervous system to tolerate being misunderstood temporarily without collapsing. And that tolerance builds power. If this resonates, if you recognize yourself in the over-explaining patterns, understand something important. Awareness is the turning point. You are not broken, you are conditioned, and conditioning can be reversed. In the next chapter, we'll confront one of the strongest forces that fuels over-explaining and emotional compliance, rejection. Because until you change your relationship with rejection, you will continue trying to prevent it at all costs. And prevention is not power. Mastery is. Chapter 7. The Rejection Reframe. Let me take you to a moment that felt like a punch to the chest. I had put months into a project. Time, energy, focus. I believed in it completely. I walked into the room prepared, sharp, certain that this was the opportunity. They listened. They nodded. They asked a few questions. And then came the sentence. "We're going in a different direction." That was it. Polite, professional, final. On the outside, I stayed composed. On the inside, everything tightened. Your work isn't good enough. You misread the room. You're not as capable as you thought. That's what rejection does. It doesn't just deny the opportunity, it attacks identity. And in that moment, I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to explain more, to send follow-up messages, to re-argue the case, to recover status. That urge is universal. Rejection triggers survival wiring. Social exclusion historically meant danger. So your nervous system treats no like a threat. But here's the shift that changed everything for me. Rejection is not a verdict. It's a filter. Read that again. Rejection equals filtering mechanism. When someone says no, one of two things is happening. Either you need to refine your skill, or you were never aligned with that room in the first place. Both outcomes serve you. But most people never reach that clarity because they personalize the rejection instead of extracting information from it. In that moment years ago, I had a choice: collapse into self-doubt or reconstruct identity around resilience. The vulnerability drop was real. For a few hours, I felt smaller, questioned myself, replayed the conversation. But then I asked a different question. What if this isn't a loss, but a redirect? That single reframing shifted my posture. Instead of proving them wrong, I focused on sharpening my craft. Instead of chasing validation, I invested in skill. Instead of resenting the rejection, I studied it. Months later, a different opportunity opened, one that fit better, paid better, and aligned more deeply. If that first door had opened, I would have settled. That's when the identity reconstruction happened. I stopped seeing rejection as an attack. I started seeing it as a filtration. Weak alignment gets removed, wrong rooms get closed, low standards get exposed, and only what fits remains. Now understand something deeper. Rejection only devastates you when your identity is tied to acceptance. If you need approval to confirm your worth, rejection feels like erasure. But if your identity is anchored internally, rejection becomes data. Data doesn't hurt, it informs. Socially, this shift is powerful. When people sense that rejection doesn't destabilize you, they respect you more. You stop negotiating for inclusion. You stop over-explaining to regain footing. You stand steady. And steadiness under rejection signals abundance. The person who fears losing opportunities chases them. The person who trusts their value selects them. This is where most people begin to separate from average behavior. But there's a deeper layer we haven't unlocked yet. Right now, we're reframing rejection. Soon, we'll remove the emotional dependency on outcomes altogether. That advanced detachment principle is what transforms resilience into true invulnerability. We'll reach it later. For now, install this permanently. Rejection is not humiliation. It is filtration. It removes what doesn't fit, so what truly aligns can find you. And once you internalize that, rejection stops shrinking you. It sharpens you. In the next chapter, we'll go further. We won't just reframe rejection. We'll turn it into leverage.
Chapter 8. Turning Rejection into Leverage. Remember Chapter 3, the rejection story I told you I'd come back to. Here it is. After that major no, I crossed paths with someone from the same circle months later. This time, I didn't pitch, I didn't prove, I didn't reference the rejection, I didn't overcompensate. I was steady, calm, unbothered. And something unexpected happened. They leaned in. They asked what I was working on now. They showed interest. Nothing about my skill had drastically changed in that short time, but my energy had. I wasn't seeking redemption. I wasn't trying to reverse the rejection. And because I wasn't chasing, the dynamic shifted. This is where rejection turns into leverage. Most people respond to rejection with pursuit. They try harder, they explain more, they offer discounts, they soften their standards, they increase supply. And when supply increases under pressure, perceived value drops. This isn't motivational theory, it's behavioral economics. Scarcity psychology shows that humans assign higher value to what feels limited or selective. When access appears constrained, desirability rises. When availability feels abundant and eager, urgency falls. If you chase after rejection, you unconsciously communicate, "I need this more than it needs me." That collapses leverage. But when you respond to rejection with composure and continued forward motion, you signal something rare: optionality. Optionality creates power. Here's the reframing.
Rejection is not a wall. It's a positioning opportunity. When someone says no, you don't withdraw your value. You withdraw your pursuit. You continue building. You continue refining. You continue moving. And you allow space to do what space does best: create curiosity. People are deeply sensitive to emotional energy shifts. If they reject you and you remain grounded, their subconscious registers it. If they expected you to chase and you don't, tension forms. If they assumed you would seek validation and you don't, perception changes. Rejection without reaction increases perceived stability, and stability is magnetic. Now let's elevate the intensity. The average person experiences rejection and shrinks. The evolving person experiences rejection and sharpens. But the dangerous individual, they become more selective. They start rejecting environments that don't align. They stop trying to fit rooms that don't recognize their value. They stop negotiating their standards. This is the identity elevation spike. You move from "I hope they choose me" to "I evaluate whether this deserves me." That shift alone changes posture, tone, and pacing. You speak slower. You smile less out of nervousness. You stop filling silence. You make decisions cleaner. And here's the paradox. When you no longer need acceptance, you often receive more of it. Not because you manipulated the outcome, but because your energy stopped signaling scarcity. Scarcity repels. Stability attracts. This is why high-value individuals do not scramble after rejection. They let it stand. They let the other side process the absence. They let time amplify curiosity. They understand something subtle. Power often lives in restraint. And this brings us closer to the advanced detachment layer, because leverage only works when you genuinely detach from needing the outcome. If you fake indifference while secretly obsessing, your microsignals betray you. True leverage requires internal calm. We're about to go deeper into that layer soon. For now, anchor this identity. You do not beg for access. You present value. If accepted, good. If rejected, you refine, reposition, and rise. And sometimes the very door that closed reopens, not because you knocked harder, but because you walked away.
Chapter 9. Living as if you need nothing. There's a subtle difference between wanting and needing. Wanting is preference. Needing is pressure. And people can feel pressure. When you need attention, your eyes search the room. When you need approval, your tone softens unnaturally. When you need agreement, your words stretch longer than necessary. Need distorts energy, and distorted energy lowers perceived value. Scarcity psychology explains why. When someone operates from internal scarcity, "I might lose this, I can't afford for this to fail, I need them to like me," their behavior tightens. They overinvest early, they overcommunicate, they overreact. Observers subconsciously detect this, and scarcity signals low leverage. Abundance psychology is different. Abundance says, "I prefer this outcome, but I will be fine without it." That subtle shift removes urgency from your nervous system. And when urgency disappears, authority appears. Social perception changes instantly when you operate as if you need nothing. You stop rushing responses. You stop chasing closure. You stop over-celebrating validation. You stop collapsing under criticism. You become steady, and steadiness is rare. Let's make this practical. Try a micro-social experiment. Next time you're in a group conversation, don't rush to fill pauses. Contribute when you have something sharp to say, not just something to say. After you speak, don't immediately justify or elaborate unless asked. Then observe. Watch who leans in.
Watch who asks follow-up questions. Watch who becomes slightly uncomfortable with the silence. You'll notice something powerful. When you remove your need to be heard, people often want to hear you more. Why? Because non-need creates curiosity. The person who talks constantly feels common. The person who speaks selectively feels valuable. This isn't manipulation, it's calibration. Most social environments are flooded with emotional noise, people competing for attention, validation, and reassurance. When you enter that space needing nothing, you feel different. Not louder, not colder, just grounded. And grounded people feel like anchors. Here's where it deepens. Living as if you need nothing doesn't mean isolation. It means internal sufficiency. You can enjoy connection without clinging to it. You can pursue opportunities without depending on them. You can express interest without collapsing into desperation. This is abundance embodied. And when you consistently embody it, something subtle happens. People begin to treat you differently. They test you less. They interrupt you less. They seek your perspective more. Because you no longer radiate the energy of someone trying to secure position. You already feel positioned. But here's the truth. There's a level beyond this. Living as if you need nothing is powerful. But there's a deeper psychological shift where even internal attachment to identity begins to loosen. Where confidence stops being something you manage and becomes something you are. We're not there yet. For now, anchor this. Needing creates pressure. Pressure leaks, and leaks reduce leverage. When you move through rooms as if you are already enough, not proving, not persuading, not performing, your presence changes. You stop reacting to social currents. You start setting them. And the moment you no longer need validation to stabilize your identity, you become very difficult to destabilize at all.
Chapter 10. The Discipline of Controlled Energy. Most people don't lack confidence. They lack control over their energy. They overspend it. They react too fast. They talk too long. They reveal too much. They give intensity where neutrality would have been stronger. Energy is currency, and like money, the more recklessly you spend it, the less power you hold. This is the concept of emotional economy. High-level individuals operate with controlled output. They do not suppress emotion, they allocate it strategically. They understand that every reaction, every word, every visible spike in intensity either increases or decreases perceived stability. And perceived stability is authority. Think about it. In negotiations, who holds more power? The person who becomes visibly excited at a good offer, or the person who remains composed, processes quietly, and responds with measured calm? Excitement reveals attachment. Attachment reduces leverage. Controlled energy preserves it. Let me give you a case-style example. Two executives receive unexpected criticism in a high-stakes meeting. The first executive leans forward, interrupts, raises their tone slightly. They defend their position immediately, explaining context and highlighting past successes. Their heart rate spikes, their speech speeds up. The second executive listens fully. They nod once. They pause. Then they say evenly, "That's useful feedback. Let's examine it." The room shifts toward the second executive, not because they were louder, because they were regulated. Regulation signals hierarchy. When you remain steady under pressure, observers subconsciously rank you higher in emotional competence. You appear difficult to shake, and humans instinctively respect what feels stable. Now, here's the uncomfortable question. How often do you spend energy impulsively? How often do you respond to a message instantly just to relieve anxiety? How often do you explain more than required because silence feels heavy? How often do you let someone's tone dictate your tone? Pause. Don't answer quickly. Notice the pattern. Every unnecessary reaction is an energy leak. Every leak lowers your psychological positioning. Controlled energy doesn't mean coldness, it means calibration. You choose when to intensify, you choose when to soften, you choose when to stay neutral, and neutrality, when intentional, is powerful. Let's raise the tension. If someone can predict your emotional reaction, they can influence you. If they know praise makes you glow, they can manipulate you with flattery. If they know criticism rattles you, they can destabilize you with doubt. If they know silence makes you anxious, they can control you with withdrawal. Predictable reactions are exploitable patterns. Controlled energy disrupts predictability. When your responses are measured, not reflexive, people hesitate before testing you. They cannot easily map your triggers. They cannot quickly pull you into emotional spirals. And that uncertainty shifts power, because power often belongs to the person who cannot be easily read. We are approaching a critical point now. You've learned to reframe rejection. You've stopped over-explaining. You've learned to live as if you need nothing. But without disciplined energy control, all of it collapses under pressure. Controlled energy is the bridge between understanding and embodiment, between theory and presence. As we move forward, the intensity will rise, because the next layer is not just about how you behave in public, it's about how you regulate yourself when no one is watching. And that's where real transformation begins.
Chapter 11. How to Stay Unbothered in High-Pressure Moments. High pressure doesn't create weakness. It exposes conditioning. Picture this. You're in a meeting. Unexpected question. All eyes shift to you. The tone feels sharp. The stakes feel real. Your heart rate spikes. Your breathing shortens. Your mind races for the right answer. In seconds, your body is no longer in a discussion. It's in threat response. Most people think confidence is a personality trait. It's not. It's nervous system regulation under stress. When pressure hits, your body activates fight or flight. Blood redirects, micro-expressions tighten, your voice subtly changes pitch. Even if your words sound composed, your physiology communicates urgency. And humans are exceptionally good at reading physiology. Behavioral psychology shows that we constantly assess social safety cues, tone, pace, posture, breathing patterns, often unconsciously. When someone appears dysregulated, observers feel it. When someone appears calm, observers borrow it. Calm is contagious, but so is panic. Let's break down the stress scenario differently. Two people are challenged publicly. The first reacts instantly. They speak fast. Their voice climbs slightly in tone. They over-clarify. They defend. The second inhales slowly. They pause 2 seconds longer than comfortable. They answer directly. No rush. No visible spike. The room settles around the second person because emotional states synchronize. Neuroscience calls this co-regulation. When one individual remains stable, others unconsciously align with that stability. The calm nervous system becomes the anchor. This is not mystical. It's biological. Your breathing rhythm influences your vocal tone. Your vocal tone influences perceived confidence. Perceived confidence influences social hierarchy. So staying unbothered isn't about pretending not to care. It's about controlling physiology first. Here's a practical breakdown. When pressure hits, slow your exhale, not your inhale, your exhale. A longer exhale signals safety to your nervous system.
Relax your jaw and tongue. Tension hides there. Lower your speaking pace by 10%. That's it. Small physiological shifts create large perceptual differences. Now let's escalate this. The reason high-pressure moments destabilize most people is identity attachment. They believe, if I fail here, I lose status. That belief fuels adrenaline. But when your identity is not hanging on a single interaction, pressure reduces dramatically. You stop seeing moments as verdicts. You start seeing them as data points. This changes posture instantly. Here's the deeper installation. Calm is dominance in disguise. Not aggressive dominance, regulated dominance. If someone attacks and you remain centered, they appear reactive. If tension rises and you lower it, you control the emotional climate. If chaos enters and you steady it, people look to you. Calm is contagious, but only when it's genuine. If you try to fake calm while your body is in panic, microsignals betray you. That's why regulation must be trained, not performed. So the next time pressure hits, don't focus on sounding confident. Focus on breathing slower. Focus on pausing longer. Focus on relaxing physically before responding verbally. You'll notice something powerful. The moment you regulate yourself, the room begins to regulate around you. And when you consistently become the emotional stabilizer in tense moments, people associate you with safety and authority. In the next chapter, we'll confront an uncomfortable truth about control and how trying too hard to control everything actually weakens your position, because unbothered energy isn't about controlling the world, it's about mastering your response to it.
Chapter 12. The Fear of Being Misunderstood. There's a fear most people never admit out loud. It's not fear of failure. It's not fear of rejection. It's the fear of being misunderstood, of saying something real and having it twisted, of setting a boundary and being labeled cold, of going quiet and being seen as weak, of succeeding and being called arrogant. So what do people do? They soften themselves. They over-explain. They dilute strong opinions. They manage perception constantly, because deep down, they're trying to protect identity. Here's the insecurity exposure. If being misunderstood shakes you, it means your identity is still externally negotiated. You still need others to confirm who you are. That's heavy, because it means every interaction becomes a silent performance, and performance is exhausting. Let's reframe something important. Misinterpretation is inevitable. No matter how clear you are, some people will project their own lens onto you, their experiences, their insecurities, their expectations. You cannot control their lens. Trying to do so is where confidence collapses. When you attempt to engineer universal understanding, you fragment yourself into versions, softer here, louder there, more agreeable here, less direct there, and slowly you lose internal cohesion. Here's the emotional spike. There was a period in my life where I tried to be understood by everyone. I would explain decisions repeatedly, clarify tone, reassure people of my intentions. It didn't work. The more I explained, the more I felt misread, because the issue wasn't clarity, it was my need for alignment. I needed them to see me correctly, and that need made me smaller. The turning point came quietly. Someone misunderstood a decision I made. They assumed arrogance where there was simply decisiveness. I felt the urge to defend myself, to rewrite their perception. And then I stopped. Not because I didn't care, but because I realized something uncomfortable. If I know my intention was clean, I don't need to manage their interpretation. That was the moment identity solidified. Here's the deeper truth. The stronger your internal definition of self, the less threatened you are by external distortion. If someone calls you cold for having boundaries, you evaluate the feedback, but you don't collapse. If someone misreads your silence as insecurity, you don't rush to correct them. If someone projects onto you, you don't absorb it automatically. You assess.
you don't react. This doesn't mean indifference, it means internal anchoring. When you accept that misunderstanding is part of visibility, something powerful happens. You stop shaping yourself to avoid criticism. You start acting in alignment with your principles. And ironically, clarity increases when you stop trying to force it, because your communication becomes cleaner, shorter, less defensive. The fear of being misunderstood is really the fear of losing social safety. But when your safety comes from within, from values, from discipline, from self-trust, misinterpretation loses its sting. You don't need universal approval, you need internal coherence, and coherence is magnetic. In the next chapter, we'll confront a deeper attachment, the need to control outcomes to protect identity, because as long as your sense of self depends on how events unfold, pressure will always exist, and we're removing pressure layer by layer, until what remains is steady.
Chapter 13. When you outgrow people. Growth is exciting in theory. In reality, it's isolating. No one talks about this part, the part where your standards rise, but your environment doesn't. The part where conversations that once felt normal now feel small. The part where you notice old validation loops, gossip, complaining, constant reassurance seeking, and you no longer feel energized by them. You feel drained. This is the social shedding process, and it's uncomfortable, because humans are wired for belonging. When you start regulating your emotions, when you stop over-explaining, when you detach from rejection and approval, something subtle shifts in your social circle. You stop participating in certain dynamics. You don't laugh as hard at the same jokes. You don't engage in the same criticism cycles. You don't rush to vent every frustration. And people notice, not always consciously, but energetically. Here's where it gets heavy. There will be moments when you realize you no longer fit in rooms that once felt like home. And instead of empowerment, you feel grief. Because growth sometimes costs familiarity. You may lose connections that were built on shared insecurity. You may drift from friendships that relied on mutual validation seeking. You may feel the quiet distance forming, not because of conflict, but because of evolution. That emotional heaviness is real. Don't ignore it. When I first started pulling back from reactive conversations, when I stopped feeding drama or oversharing frustration, some people became uncomfortable. They would try to pull me back in. "Why are you so quiet lately? You've changed. You think you're better now?" Those statements sting because they target identity. And for a moment, I questioned myself. Am I becoming distant? Am I losing warmth? Am I isolating? But then I saw the pattern clearly. The discomfort wasn't about me becoming worse. It was about me becoming less predictable. When you outgrow people, what they often miss is not you, it's the version of you that participated in familiar emotional loops. And when you no longer participate, the loop breaks. Detachment from old validation cycles is necessary for identity reinforcement. If your confidence was previously fueled by group approval, you must tolerate the withdrawal phase. If your belonging came from shared complaints, you must accept temporary loneliness while recalibrating. This is the threshold. Most people retreat here. They shrink back to fit. They lower standards to restore comfort. They rejoin the noise to avoid isolation. But if you stay steady, something else happens. New environments begin to align. Conversations deepen. Silence becomes natural, not awkward. Respect replaces reassurance. This is identity reinforcement in action. You are no longer defined by who includes you. You are defined by how you conduct yourself. But we're approaching a psychological climax, because outgrowing people is not the final step. The final step is outgrowing the need to be understood by them. Outgrowing the urge to prove you've evolved. Outgrowing the subtle desire for them to recognize your growth. That's deeper, and that's harder, because it removes the last thread tying your identity to external acknowledgement. In the next chapter, we step into that final detachment layer,
where confidence stops being something you practice and becomes something you embody, regardless of who stays or leaves.
Chapter 14. The moment you realize you're different. There will be a moment. It won't be loud. It won't come with applause. It will happen quietly. You'll walk into a room you've entered 100 times before, and something will feel different. Not the room, you. Transformation is rarely dramatic from the inside. It's subtle, gradual, layered, until one day you notice you're not reacting the way you used to. Before, you would scan for approval. Now, you scan for alignment. Before, you would prepare explanations in advance. Now, you're comfortable with simple statements. Before, tension in the room would infect you. Now, you stabilize it. That's the shift. Let's contrast it clearly. Before. You replayed conversations at night. You wondered if you said too much or too little. You adjusted your personality depending on who you were around. You felt a small spike of anxiety when someone important entered the room. After. You sleep without replay. You stand by what you said without overanalysis. Your personality remains consistent across environments. Presence replaces performance. And the social response shift is unmistakable. People interrupt you less. They don't test you as often. They listen more carefully when you speak, not because you demanded respect, but because you stopped negotiating your worth. Your tone slows down naturally. Your body language opens without exaggeration. Your eye contact becomes steady, not intense, just grounded. You are no longer trying to win the room. You are evaluating it. That subtle reversal changes hierarchy. Here's something powerful. When you stop reacting to minor provocations, people stop attempting them. When you stop chasing approval, people start offering it more freely. When you stop filling silence, others lean into it. Authority embodiment is not about dominance. It's about coherence. Your internal state matches your external behavior. There's no scrambling behind your words, no tension hiding beneath your smile, no urgency leaking through your tone. You don't rush to defend. You don't rush to impress. You don't rush at all. And that lack of rush feels elevated. At some point, someone will comment on it. You seem different lately. They may mean it as curiosity. They may mean it as subtle challenge. Either way, you won't feel the need to justify the change, because you won't see it as change. You'll see it as alignment. This is where embodiment replaces effort. Confidence is no longer something you switch on for interviews, meetings, or social settings. It's your baseline. You don't prepare to be calm. You are calm. You don't remind yourself not to over-explain. You simply don't. You don't rehearse being unbothered. You've regulated your nervous system enough times that steadiness is default. And here's the deeper realization. You didn't become louder. You didn't become colder. You became internally sufficient. The moment you realize you're different is the moment you stop proving it, because you no longer need evidence. You feel it. And when you feel it, others sense it. But we're not finished, because there is one final layer beyond confidence, a layer where control itself begins to dissolve, and something even stronger replaces it. We're about to step into that. Chapter 15. The Peak. Becoming Untouchable. This is where everything converges. Silence, rejection, detachment, controlled energy. At first, they felt like separate skills. Now they merge into identity. Becoming untouchable is not about arrogance. It's not about coldness. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about reaching a state where external forces struggle to move you without your permission. That's the crescendo.
You walk into rooms without scanning for threats. You hear criticism without internal collapse. You experience rejection without identity fracture. You sit in silence without discomfort. And because you don't flinch, people feel it. Let's bring the loops together. Silence used to feel heavy. Now it feels like space. Rejection used to feel like a verdict. Now it feels like filtration. Detachment used to feel like loss. Now it feels like leverage. When these shifts combine, something powerful happens. Your baseline stabilizes. Most people operate like open circuits. Praise spikes them up. Criticism crashes them down. Attention excites them. Withdrawal deflates them. They are externally powered. You are internally powered. That difference is visible. Untouchable does not mean unfeeling. It means unshaken. Someone raises their voice, you lower yours. Someone tries to provoke, you respond minimally. Someone withdraws approval, you continue forward. You no longer need to correct every misinterpretation. You no longer chase redemption after rejection. You no longer over-explain to secure belonging. Calm dominance replaces emotional performance. Picture a high-pressure negotiation. The other side attempts urgency tactics, deadlines, tone shifts, strategic silence meant to pressure. Old you would have reacted, explained faster, conceded slightly, filled the silence. New you leans back, breath steady, response measured. You don't rush, you don't overreact, you don't reveal attachment. And because you don't move first, they do. That's calm dominance. Power is often the ability to remain still while others exhaust themselves. Now feel the emotional elevation. Think about who you were at the beginning of this journey. Reactive, over-explaining, fearful of rejection, needing to be understood. Now compare that to this version. Regulated, selective, grounded, self-defined. This is the identity installation moment. You are no longer practicing confidence. You are embodying stability. And when stability becomes identity, you stop worrying about being tested, because tests require reactions, and reactions are now chosen, not triggered. But here's the final tension. If you cling to being untouchable as a shield, it becomes another attachment. If you build confidence to avoid pain, pain still controls you indirectly. So there's one final reveal, one final layer beyond dominance, beyond detachment, beyond emotional control. It's not about becoming harder, it's about becoming free. In the next chapter, we step into the advanced principle that makes all of this effortless. Not managed, not maintained, effortless. And once you see it, you won't just feel untouchable, you'll feel unburdened.
Chapter 16. The Dark Side of Confidence. At this stage, something dangerous can happen. You regulate your emotions. You stop chasing approval. You handle rejection with composure. You move through rooms without flinching. And slowly, confidence hardens. What began as stability can quietly turn into superiority. This is the dark side. When you realize you are less reactive than most people, it's tempting to judge them. When you no longer need validation, it's tempting to look down on those who do. When you master silence, it's tempting to weaponize it to intimidate. Confidence without awareness becomes arrogance, and arrogance is just insecurity in disguise. Let's ground this ethically. True strength does not require diminishing others. If your calm only exists to feel above people, you're still dependent on comparison. If your detachment is used to create emotional distance as protection, you are still afraid. The psychological balance principle is simple. Power must be paired with humility. Regulation without empathy becomes coldness. Detachment without compassion becomes isolation. Silence without clarity becomes manipulation. This is where many people derail. They confuse emotional control with emotional suppression.
They confuse non-neediness with indifference. They confuse authority with dominance. But authority deepens through nuance. A truly grounded individual can be calm and warm, firm and kind, detached from outcomes, yet fully engaged in effort. That balance is rare. Here's the subtle test. If someone weaker than you makes a mistake, how do you respond? Do you internally criticize? Do you withdraw empathy? Do you subtly signal superiority? Or do you remain steady without ego inflation? The dark side of confidence appears when ego reattaches to identity. I am the unshaken one. I am more evolved. I don't react like them. That narrative is seductive, but it rebuilds dependency, this time on being the strongest in the room. And dependency in any form weakens freedom. Remember this, the goal was never to dominate people. The goal was to master yourself. If your growth creates distance from others without increasing understanding, you've tilted too far. Real confidence allows space for imperfection, both yours and theirs. It acknowledges that everyone operates from conditioning, that reactivity is learned, that insecurity is human. When you see that clearly, arrogance dissolves, and something deeper replaces it, compassionate stability. You don't need to prove you're different. You don't need to showcase calmness. You don't need to signal that you're above emotional chaos. You simply remain grounded, without judgment. This deepens authority in a way aggression never could. People trust balanced individuals. They respect controlled individuals, but they follow integrated individuals, those who combine strength with awareness. This chapter is your calibration point. Power without ethics becomes intimidation. Power with humility becomes influence. As we approach the final reveal, understand this clearly. Confidence is not the destination. Freedom is. And freedom requires letting go of even the identity of being untouchable. Because the strongest position isn't being above others, it's being fully anchored, without needing to measure yourself against anyone at all.
Chapter 17. The Advanced Principle. Psychological Non-Attachment. At the very beginning, I told you something. By the end of this, people will treat you differently. And I left an open loop. There was an advanced principle behind all of it, not silence alone, not rejection reframing, not controlled energy, not even detachment as we've described it so far. The real shift is deeper. Psychological non-attachment. This is the principle that makes everything else effortless. Let's define it clearly. Non-attachment does not mean apathy. It does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop tying your identity to outcomes, perceptions, praise, rejection, or control. You participate fully, but you are not psychologically fused to the result. The ancient Stoics understood part of this. They separated what is within your control from what is not, your effort versus external events. But behavioral psychology adds another layer. Most emotional suffering comes from conditioned associations. You were conditioned to associate praise with safety, rejection with danger, agreement with belonging, silence with threat, so you reacted automatically. Non-attachment breaks those conditioned links. It says, praise is pleasant but not identity. Rejection is information, not erasure. Silence is space, not judgment. Outcome is variable. Effort is constant. When those associations weaken, emotional volatility drops dramatically, and something extraordinary happens. You become internally sovereign. Internal sovereignty means your self-concept is self-generated. It is not crowdsourced. It is not negotiated in rooms. It is not updated based on applause. It is anchored in values, discipline, and self-observation. Here's the philosophical depth. Most people live in a constant state of subtle dependency. They depend on smooth conversations to feel socially safe.
They depend on validation to feel competent. They depend on control to feel secure. Dependency creates fragility. Non-attachment creates durability. When you no longer need a specific outcome to feel whole, you become calm in uncertainty. When you no longer need people to agree with you to feel valid, you become firm without aggression. When you no longer need to win to feel worthy, you become dangerous in competition, because you are free. Let's synthesize this clearly. Silence worked because you were not attached to filling space. Rejection lost power because you were not attached to universal acceptance. Controlled energy stabilized because you were not attached to immediate relief. Every chapter was preparing you for this. The advanced principle is not a tactic, it is a state. You still act, you still pursue, you still build, but internally you release the grip. You allow events to unfold without binding your identity to them. This reduces anxiety at its root, not by suppressing fear, but by dissolving the dependency that fuels it. Now return to that promise. People will treat you differently. Why? Because non-attachment is rare. When you cannot be baited by praise, manipulated by urgency, destabilized by criticism, or diminished by rejection, others sense it. You feel lighter, not rigid, not armored, just steady. Psychological non-attachment is the final layer. It transforms confidence from performance into presence, from effort into ease, from control into freedom. And when you live from internal sovereignty, something shifts permanently. You stop trying to become confident. You simply stop being controlled.
Chapter 18. Social Proof of Presence. You don't truly know you've changed until the world responds to it. Internal shifts are powerful, but social proof confirms embodiment. Let's look at composite examples, patterns observed again and again. Case 1. A professional who used to over-explain in meetings begins trimming responses. Clear statements, slower pace, less filler language. Within weeks, interruptions decrease. Colleagues begin asking for their opinion directly. Not because their technical skills suddenly improved, but because their delivery stabilized. Case 2. Someone who previously chased after lukewarm romantic interest decides to stop pursuing after mixed signals. No dramatic exit, no emotional monologue, just clean withdrawal. Days later, the other person reinitiates contact. Curiosity increases. Perceived value shifts. Case 3. An individual in a family dynamic known for emotional volatility begins responding differently. When tension rises, they lower their voice instead of matching tone. When guilt tactics appear, they don't over-defend. Over time, arguments shorten, provocations reduce, because predictable reactions disappear. These are not isolated incidents. They reflect consistent behavioral science patterns. Research in social perception shows that people attribute leadership qualities to individuals who display emotional regulation, slower speech cadence, and reduced reactive body language. Stability signals competence. Composure signals authority. You don't need to announce change. You demonstrate it. Observable behavioral shifts become your evidence. You pause before answering difficult questions. You say no without apology padding. You let silence sit. You stop justifying every boundary, and the response from others becomes data. They lean in more. They push less. They respect more. Here's what's important. You are not changing to manipulate outcomes. You are changing to align internally. The external response is a byproduct. That distinction protects you from sliding back into performance mode, because the moment you regulate yourself only to control others, attachment returns. Stay anchored. Now feel the long-term arc. Months from now, someone new will meet you. They won't know the reactive version of you. They won't know the over-explaining version. They won't know the validation-seeking version. They will only know the grounded one. And to them, your calm will seem natural. Your boundaries will seem normal. Your silence will seem intentional. This is identity solidified over time. Confidence becomes reputation, not because you told people who you are, but because your behavior stayed consistent long enough for others to categorize you accordingly. Consistency builds narrative. Narrative builds perception. Perception builds social proof. But the deepest anchor is internal. You no longer monitor reactions obsessively. You no longer analyze every interaction at night. You no longer adjust yourself constantly for comfort. Instead, you evaluate alignment. You engage fully. You detach cleanly. You regulate instinctively. This is presence. Not forced stillness, not calculated dominance, just embodied stability. And the longer you maintain it, the less effort it requires. Because what begins as practice becomes pattern. What becomes pattern becomes identity. And identity, when rooted internally, does not shake easily. In the final chapter, we bring everything together, not as techniques, not as strategies, but as a way of being that remains steady, whether watched or alone.
Chapter 19. The Unshakable Identity. By now, you've traced the subtle currents of influence. You've tested the limits of confidence and navigated the hidden patterns of human behavior. Each insight, each principle has not been just a lesson. It has been a step towards something far greater, an unshakable identity. This is not about external validation. It is not about fleeting respect or temporary admiration. It is about knowing, at your very core, who you are, and walking through the world from that place of absolute clarity. Take a moment. Feel it. The calm power that comes from mastery of self. The quiet authority that requires no shouting. Your presence alone commands attention, not because it demands it, but because it radiates certainty. Every gesture, every word, every pause carries weight. Not as an act of performance, but as a natural reflection of the self you've refined. You were no longer a reaction to chaos. You were the axis around which clarity turns. This is the emotional crescendo, the moment where all your previous lessons converge into a single, undeniable truth. Confidence, rooted in identity, cannot be shaken. Doubts may still surface, but they no longer define you. Fear may knock, but it is met with calm observation, not panic. Influence, persuasion, connection are no longer tools you wield. They are natural extensions of the self you have meticulously refined. And yet, this is only the beginning. An unshakable identity is not static. It is a living force, one that will evolve, stretch, deepen. Every challenge, every relationship, every moment of discomfort is an opportunity to reaffirm your core, sharpen your presence, deepen your mastery. Take a breath, let it sink in. You have transformed the way you interact with the world. You have anchored yourself in authority without arrogance, in empathy without compromise, in clarity without rigidity. You have become someone who moves through life as both participant and observer. Someone whose identity cannot be borrowed, shaken, or diluted. If this resonates, take it further. Speak with authority, not because you have to, but because it is who you are. Engage with your community not for approval, but for authentic connection. And share your breakthrough. Comment below with the word unshakable. Let the world see the impact of an identity fully claimed. This is not the end. In the next audiobook, we will explore the next frontier. How to wield your unshakable identity to create profound influence, lasting relationships, unstoppable momentum in every area of life. Rise with intention.
walk with clarity, and let the unshakable self you've cultivated guide every action, every decision, every interaction. The world is waiting for your authority, your presence, your authenticity to make its mark.